Welcome back, everyone, to West Coast Bannerman's podcast. Just an FYI update, we are now a triple threat, everything we've dreamed of being. I will be releasing an article, a podcast, and a video for each topic from now on. So, in this topic here, we have the new start of a friendly turn. And I bring in Carlo from A Song of Ice and Fire stats.com to discuss tempo, activation control, and what the new ruling for the Unsullied Officer means for not only the officer but for other effects as well. So I hope you enjoy, and if you want to read about this, you'll be able to, and if you want to watch, read, and listen about this, you'll be able to as well. So stay tuned for YouTube updates, article updates, and the A Song of Ice and Fire Guild.com, and enjoy the podcast. Thank you. All right, our topic today is the new and improved friendly turn. This is a controversial headline because some people thought it was always played this way. But I'll just quote the FAQ from the new 1.6 regarding the Unsullied Officer real quick. Question: do I need to have a unit left to activate in order to trigger Relentless? Answer: no. Relentless is not reliant on having an activated unit. Follow up: how does this interact if I have previously passed my turn due to no longer having units left to activate? Even if a player has to pass on their turn, they still have a turn, meaning at start of turn effects, such as Relentless, can be triggered. Yes, this means a player can pass multiple turns and before the end of the round, still trigger Relentless. So, quoting a specific part of that, even if a player has to pass on their turn, they still have a turn. It's kind of a contradictory sentence, but it does make sense. It's like your turn begins and then you got to pass. So I get it. What are your initial thoughts on this one, Carlo?
I think that you say some people were playing it this way, but honestly, I've never ever met a person who thought that that was the rule. And I've watched a lot of other people play from other communities, and I'm reasonably active on the Discord and all those things. So I've never met somebody who thought that that was the ruling before this FAQ. So I actually think it's a bit odd that it was considered a frequently asked question. I'd never even seen the question come up before. If anything, I feel like it's more like a sneaky errata. Rules change, like snuck in under the name of an FAQ. But I love the rule itself. I love the change and the effect that it has upon the game. I think that it opens up a lot more scope for lower activation armies being able to have some effect on their opponent, because what we see at the moment in the competitive environment is that one of the best ways that you can play and build your list is to just try and brute force out activate your opponent and leave them with no options. So anything that kind of plays against that and gives the person with the less activations still a slightly higher amount of control over their own game is brilliant for me.
Absolutely, well said. And part of the reason why Carlos here today, because he has been and was focusing on the series about tempo and activation control, etc. Carlos been all about that if you've been following him on A Song of Ice and Fire stats.com. So I'm super happy to have him here today talking about it.
So tempo, as a concept, for those who aren't aware, is the idea that I will be able to play a activation at the very end of my at the end of a given round, make an aggressive move. It could be a charge, or maybe I'll march into a flanking position or something like that, with the intention that I will either follow it up with a charge as the first action of my next round, or possibly if I've already engaged in the previous round, I will be looking to take swords on the tactics board for a second attack, which, as long as I'm doing this with quite an aggressive unit, I'm probably very, very likely to just completely destroy a unit without you being able to react to it. That's what the core concept of what tempo is. And if we both have equal number of activations, then the person who gets to do this will flip each round. When I go second on a given round, I will have the last activation, and I'm about to go into the turn where I have the first activation next round. So because of the way that priority in any given turn flips from one side to the other, if we're equal activations, we both get to do tempo. The problem with tempo actually is that it starts to fall apart if your opponent ever has more activations than you. If they have more activations than you, you will never get to play the last activation of a given round. So you'll only ever be taking one action in a row, and they, depending on how many activations they have to outnumber you, will almost definitely be taking bonus activations that you can't react to. And that's where things get difficult, and that's where in very high level competitive play, high activation count seems to be the one thing that's causing the high win rates. You know, it's the most important factor in building your army, rather than what these units can do themselves. It's how many activations can I put on the table.
There you go. All right, and a quick side note for all my Targaryen players out there. Ramsay Bolton, automatic tempo, cruel methods, bring Pride Pre. Boom, there you go. All right, done
Very
with
true.
it.
There are some really unique and interesting ways to create like additional tempo, to create really big plays. Targaryens actually have quite a few. I also really liked, is it Force March, I believe, which both Grey Worm and Dario Naharis bring. That will allow you to take this March action, which like would normally have been the last activation of the previous round, into you then charging somebody in the flank. But you now get to do it before the first activation of a given round. You just take a march, then take a charge. That's like tempo in a card, exactly the same way as you're talking about with Ramsay. So there are specific instances where this can occur without you having to have activation advantage, but activation advantage just inherently gives it to you every turn. And also what's difficult at the moment is that the playing of these tactics cards is the one thing that your opponent could interact with. They can cancel that effect much more easily than they can stop a unit from activating at all.
Indeed.
So, you know, the high activation count is the most reliable way to do it, whereas tactics cards can be a bit risky. And if you've put yourself in a situation where you need this to go off, you better hope that, you know, you're not playing somebody who could have counterplays.
Yeah, I mean, why not both? Hashtag Ramsay Stark OP. All right, so back to the FAQ and our notes. What does this mean further on? So interpreting it means, you know, before we could do the start of any turn effects. That's never changed. But now we can do start of friendly turn later on in the round when we're all done with our activations, which can be quite useful. So before we get into the list that I made and our discussion on this topic, I wanted to add this in during editing that we did not cover the possibility of doing start of any turn effects during your opponent's friendly turn when they're done activating, and then following into an immediate beginning of friendly turn. So you can combo those two effects in a row at the end of a round when your opponent is all done activating, and you might have one extra activation than them, and you have these two things in your hand, or one on the table, one in your hand, etc. You can say, okay, well, you have to pass your turn, but I can do this, which is start of any turn. And then on my last turn, I'll do a start of beginning of my turn effect. The only combo that jumped out at me for this was a Night Gathers card from Jorah Mormont into one of the start of a friendly turn effects that you'll hear about soon. So that might be the only one. I haven't looked into it, but it's there. So anyways, back to the normal show. I'm going to do a quick run through of the list I have that I've caught. I may have missed one or two or something, but we have Mark Target from Multi-Factions. That's the Placing the Vulnerable. We have Cunning Scheme from the neutral deck. Horn That Wakes the Sleepers from Night's Watch. We have Ruthless Approach from Alistair Thorne. Styre's Vengeance from Free Folk. We have Meticulous Planning from Mance, I believe. Then we have Scout Openings from the solo Jorah, Wandering Knight. And then, of course, of course, we have Relentless. So we're just going to run through here and maybe just like ponder some now useful things we can do with these. So first up, we have Mark Target. I just jotted down quickly the things like the North remembers. So if you mark target and then something dies, you can reactivate something, counterattack, and then combining it with Relentless. Anything you want to add, or what are your thoughts on mark target now that we can use it later on?
It has a small amount of value. Quite a few of these have like a little bonus effect, but it's those later ones that we're going to come to further down that list that are really going to actually impact the way the game plays. Mark target, it's nice, but mostly you had the opportunity to use it earlier in the turn, and it's not going to massively change your game plan being able to use it later.
Oh, one thing I just thought of, light bulb effect, I haven't jotted down yet, is that game mode where the walls shoot. You could place a vulnerable token later on when your opponent goes and grabs a token. Oh, you want to grab that? Here's a vulnerable. Bam. So that'll be nice. And yeah, and just in general, it's like if you forgot to use it, there's no reason to beat yourself up and say, "Oh, screw it, I won't do it then." If you forgot to use mark target, you can still use it. So use it before the round's up, so you can use it again next round. Moving on, we have Cunning Scheme from the neutral deck. Now this one creates all types of shenanigans because you get to search your discard pile, I believe, for any card. And my notes say deck, but I think it's discard pile. So there are some really nice things you can combo with. Any thoughts from you, Carlo, on Cunning Scheme?
Yeah, that one is more important because if you're being out activated, being able to draw a particular tactics card back into your hand based on what situation you find yourself being in later on in the turn, you've now seen more information and you now get to make a choice based on like knowing more information about where your opponent's going to try and like go for you, what things, whether or not your opponent's going to be aggressive or defensive on their next turn. And that's what it's all about, really. It's about having more information at your disposal when you make these choices, rather than being forced to make choices really early in the round, having to predict what might happen later.
Completely agree. Well said, and we can just move on with that one. If you guys are playing neutrals, check out the endless possibilities with Cunning Scheme late in the round. Okay, I'm adding in a little clip here because I knew I forgot one. There might be more, but I did forget Sadistic Games from Ramsey Bolton. I have no idea how I forgot that one, but check that one out. There's definitely some cool things you can do at your last friendly turn to maybe at the end of a Game of Thrones scenario, put a panic token on the center objective enemy, or deal some hits, surprise your opponent with a wolf kill or something. So who knows? But Sadistic Games is one that we did not get to discuss. Check it out. Alright, so moving on to Night's Watch, we have Horn That Wakes the Sleepers. Another one that can be quite combo potential. What do you think on this one, Carlo?
So, I believe, so is this the, let me just check correctly.
That's
Are we talking about the playing of Horn That Wakes the Sleepers, or are we talking about the effect where Horn That Wakes the Sleepers can be swapped for a different card?
Both, because you can play it at the beginning of your turn, late in the round, grab 2 cards, I think. Yeah. And then if you have the letters, now you have that vow available for the rest of the round, or the beginning of the next round even. Or I guess that wouldn't matter as much because it would be at the beginning of your turn anyways. But you get to play the card before the round is up, therefore drawing more cards, right? Also, you have the vow in case late in the round he might be coming up to, swift advance into you or something. You can use that vow to grab shields from your discard pile or something.
Yeah. I think that Horn That Wakes the Sleepers nearly always gets played. When in hand, it gets played like instantly. Like as soon as the first activation, first start of the round, players are just like, I'll take more cards. And that's what it's generally used for. It could actually open up a situation where you possibly have vowels like on almost all your units, and you decide instead you're going to hold Horn That Wakes the Sleepers until later in the round, let these units like maintain their vow effect, and then later in the round, after things have happened, after you've fully activated, you say, okay, but now I know what's going on, I'm actually going to swap out one of these vowels, which now doesn't have a use for me. So once I'm sure that I'm safe, I don't need this Shields That Guards the Realms of Men or anything like that, I might swap it as the very last thing I do to draw some more cards. Again, relatively niche, unique kind of situations, but it all just allows the player more control.
So we're going to move on, sticking with Night's Watch, Alistair Thorne's Ruthless Approach. Ruthless Approach is an Alistair Thorne card. Depending on the zone you control, you grant effects to your opponent, an enemy combat unit. And this is played on your turn. So, combining what we've learned with tempo and activation control, and looking at this card, the quick conclusion is I'm going to play this super early, get as many, and then pile on as many effects as I can on it. Maybe even force my opponent to grab zones they don't normally want because this card's on something, which does have a great use. But we're talking late in the round, so how can we apply that to this card, Carlo?
So if we go back to our idea of tempo, and that you're probably going to want to take a really aggressive action with a powerful unit late in the round. Once we start to understand tempo quite well, it can be quite predictable what your opponent's going to do and what unit they want to do it with, but you might not have any ways to stop it. And you might be completely convinced that you know that your opponent's going to charge with those Brand Berserkers as the last activation of the round, and you're like thinking, there's nothing I can do about it. And they're going to set up their whole turn so that they're in that position where those Berserkers charge as their last thing, and then the first thing next round, they're just going to wipe you out. And you feel like you might have no reaction to it. But if we allow ourselves to play Ruthless Approach, after they've finished activating everything but this one unit, they might have played their entire turn around the fact that they're going to make this really big play with this unit, and then suddenly you hit them with, oh, by the way, that big play you played your entire turn around actually is going to be nowhere near as effective as you thought it was going to be. You might have -2 movement, so you can't get them in the position where you thought you were going to. You've given them negative attacks, or any of these negative effects could really change the tempo that they thought that they were going to make. And that way of like surprising your opponent can actually have a huge effect. So I think that this has a real new effect on Ruthless Approach. Again, as always, it's going to come up relatively rarely, but there are real situations where you will know what they're going to do with their tempo, but this now gives you a way to not just try and blunt the attack, but actually surprise them with the element that this is not going to go as well as they thought it was going to.
Indeed. Combines very well with a late Pathetic Attempt as well. So, Alistair in the late rounds, watch out. All right. We're going to go ahead and head to, let's see, Free Folk. Free Folk, yes. Free Folk, and this is a huge one that I'm excited about because I'm starting to dabble with some Free Folk. I know. I'm late to the party. But Styre's Vengeance from Commander Styre. My notes here just say so many combinations. So, what is Styre's Vengeance? Let's see here.
Styre's Vengeance says that if a friendly unit has been destroyed that round, then you can take the activation token off of one of your units at the start of a friendly turn. Well, let's just start by saying, if by some miracle you've managed to start out activating the Free Folk, then you're probably in quite a good situation right now, unless, of course, they could be playing quite an elite giant list, maybe. We also see quite a bit of the Bone Lords Chosen at the moment. So, there are situations where the Free Folk are playing low activation lists.
Rarely. But, yeah, so I guess the effect is possibly minimal, but
I think
they do disappear.
actually
They do
have.
disappear
Sorry.
quickly, so you can end up with round three. You can end up with quite lower activations than your opponent.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the
This
combinations I thought
actually had
of.
a
Go ahead. Sorry.
this had this had a real effect actually in a game I played at just the other day. Must have been yesterday. God, I played a game yesterday against Free Folk against the Steyr army. I was playing Ben from Blitz Minis, and I was very aware that he might have Steer's Vengeance, and I was very very scared that he would be able to reactivate a unit of Bone Lords Chosen. And interestingly, it brings like it is a bit of a once you know that your opponent can now do these things, there are workarounds.
Mm-hmm.
Being that I had not destroyed a unit yet of his that turn, and I was very sure that I didn't want to allow him the chance to play Steer's Vengeance. So I made sure that the unit that I destroyed was with my very last activation, which was after his last activation. So I'm pretty sure that the new ruling means that if I have extra activations after my opponent, they get a turn in between each of them in
Yes.
which they can play starter friendly turns. But it does not allow them a turn after I've finished.
Right.
So, there is that stipulation. Like, once we've both actually fully activated, the round is over.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't a bonus turn for your opponent to start using things in.
Correct.
So you can still play around it, but it was a huge card, and I think it can have huge plays. It didn't help me that much because it just allowed him to play 2 lots of Steyer's Vengeance on the following turn. But yes, it can have huge effects.
Yeah. So one of them, for those one NCU free folk crazies, is Endless Horde, and everyone wants to block the horse, when playing against free folk. But in the combination of Steyer's Vengeance and Endless Horde, you don't care. So you play your NCU last, you play Endless Horde, and then you can play Steyer's Vengeance to reactivate that unit that you just deployed. There's all types of different combos, but I think the potential is very high for a late Steyer's Vengeance to have a great effect on the game. Now let's talk about Mance's meticulous planning. So this is another kind of niche one, I think, where the card has been talked about as being garbage, I guess. But I don't have much free folk experience, so what are your thoughts on meticulous planning, I guess, real quick in general, and then what about using it at the very end of the round?
I actually don't know meticulous planning off the top of my head. I'll have to look up the card.
It is discarding meticulous planning and another card to draw any card you want.
That's okay. I think that its value increases the further into the round we go. So being able to play this after your opponent has finished has a lot more value than it does early, I think. So there are a few things here. If your opponent's finished playing, then you would be far more likely to be willing to just start discarding cards. So the discard effect has much less effect now. You know that you're not going to need or be able to trigger any of these other cards in your hand because you just are, you're done in terms of what triggers you will be able to control. So the discard part can really have a large effect the later you use it, and it can be pulling some cards that have a big effect. So I think that it could allow for some plays. I can't think off the top of my head what exact cards, because obviously if you're running Mance, you're not running Steyr, so you can't be taking Steyer's Vengeance, for example. But there are cards in the Free Folk deck which could really change things for you, and you could be more reactive with it and really set yourself up as a response to what your opponent's just done.
Yeah, I think there's the one that when you attack, you get like Crypt Blow Sundering or something like that. If you have another
gang up, maybe does that one?
It might be called
right?
gang up. So you can like ditch your hand, grab gang up, and then that was the beginning of your turn. And then now when you attack and you gang up, you get a big bonus that you need. So that's a great combo. I was thinking with this one at the end of the round when the free folk, again, rarely, are out before the opponent, you can just you can like ditch an extra card, right? So if you got two cards left in your hand, this one and another one that you don't want, you can use it, grab a card, to like cite to, or not ditch an extra card. Sorry, it's
Yeah, you could even be considering like you're just trying to grab a card which you don't even want to discard it to draw more cards. But you can control what you want. I think I'm just looking at the deck here. I feel like maybe there are some uses on, for example, let me find the name, Surrounded and Exposed. You might
yeah,
not have considered that you would end up in a position where Surrounded and Exposed is possible to play.
right,
So your opponent moves up and they're still unactivated, and suddenly you realize that they're going to make this really big play that you hadn't thought that they were going to. You get a turn now. You play Meticulous Planning. You discard a card and you say, "I want Surrounded and Exposed." So there you go. That was your turn, and then your opponent's turn begins, and you've now got a card which you can play at the start of any turn, and you say, "Okay, you are now surrounded and exposed, and you have no abilities left." And if I've got that horses, you've also got a token, so that can have that reactionary effect to that tempo play.
yep,
Of course, it was still possible before, but now you can wait until you've seen it happen to be willing to commit this meticulous planning plus the other card, all to get this card surrounded and exposed, which generally speaking is considered one of the weaker free folk cards because of like the difficult stipulation. Like it has a relatively high barrier to being able to be triggered, which is 2 units within short range, which doesn't happen that often when your opponent controls the positioning.
yeah. And I was just looking as well, and I remember one of the notes now that because I didn't write the note fully, that there's too many cards. So a lot of game modes you drop tokens with panic tests, so you can go, okay, you have more turns after this. I'm gonna pass, but before I pass, I play Meticulous Planning. I grab there's too many, and then when
Yeah.
he goes and he activates combat unit, boom, panic test. So, which
It
I
can be a
get.
really big changer if you thought that you were going to be able to make them drop the test from maybe multiple actions that you had during the round, and then all of a sudden you realize that the VP of making them drop that token is more important than anything else than you have in hand. Then they're the kind of plays that you need to make.
Yeah, I guess we'll finish this by saying you can use it late round when you're out activated to use one of these free folk cards that are on your enemy's turn, and then draw up 3 more. You know, like you don't have to use it to get a card to play next round. You can go, okay, free folk have cards that happen on my enemy's turn. I'm gonna go grab one. So that is a possibility with that one. All right. Let's go over to the highlight reel of this FAQ, Targaryens. And we'll start out with our, the one, the only Wandering Knight, Jorah Mormont. Actually, there's 5 Jorah Mormonts, let's not forget. But
One the 5.
the one of the 5. Scout openings. The most probably rarely executed ability in the game. I've never seen it happen, but so my notes here are like,
I've used it once by cheating and thinking that it was within long range. When I later found out that it was short range, I thought, well, that's a lot worse than I thought it was.
yeah, scouting from short range. So useful. I wrote down useful in secret mission modes. So to smack those condition tokens late in the round, even if you're activated, bam, grabbing those secret mission points could be cool. But also, of course, combining with Relentless, which we'll talk about shortly. But before we do, anything else from you for scout openings?
I think that this has a big effect on scout openings. Jorah's in such an odd situation. He has very little health, very little defense, but he wants to be within short range of an enemy. Yeah. What that means is that he has to get out of line of sight.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing is that if I move into your flank out of your line of sight before you've activated, you'll probably just maneuver, turn and look at me, and then you're going to charge me next round. But if I can do it as my very last activation of the round. I move Jorah into a position in your flank after you've activated, and then it goes to your turn, and I have nothing left because chances are I'm playing Targaryens and I'm out activated. That's currently their problem in terms of like where we see them competitively. They just can't compete on this activation high count spam kind of lists. And I can get into that position and then I can scout you after I've finished playing. And I think that that's actually a really big effect and can open up Jorah's value. Funnily enough, Jorah is actually one of the highest rated Targaryen combat units that you can pick. Simply because buying Jorah for 3 points is more important than the fact that he doesn't kill anything and probably dies. So that's just kind of a state of where we're at. But yeah, if you actually want to do well with Targaryens, then I think you should think about picking up Jorah. And I think that this FAQ really does help him.
I agree completely. Thanks for spelling that out for us. Well said. So let's move on to the big one, the Relentless from Unsullied Officer. We could probably have a 40-minute podcast just on this, but we're already at 40 minutes, I think. So let's try to spell it out, but not in an hour's time. So I'm going to let you go first on this one. What are your thoughts on Relentless and the new FAQ?
It's huge. There's a reason why the FAQ is effectively answered inside of Relentless, even though we've just gone through a huge list of other effects that it also applies to. There's a reason why Relentless is the answer, because Relentless is the thing that is affected by it. The thing that goes from being basically not useful in reality to being incredibly powerful now. So effectively the way it worked before was Relentless was you will buy this Unsullied Officer, so far the only way that you can gain Relentless, for 3 points. But this is going to drag your activation count down, and unless you could force a way for you to be able to use Relentless early in the round, it was basically costing you an action, because a clever opponent was never allowing you to gain this free attack action. If you used it on archers, you'd maybe move those archers up and your opponent would just move out of range of them, and now there's nothing you can do. He waits till you're fully activated and then he moves back into range. And he can do that because of the fact that you've spent so many points on gaining this inverted commas free activation, this free action, and yet clever opponents can just play around it, so you never get the chance to use it. Now, not only is it a guarantee that if there is some kind of combat going on, if you're in range, if you're in melee, if somebody's within range of your long range unit, that you will get to use it. More importantly than just that, it allows you to use it after your opponent has finished, or after you've finished acting and your opponent is just kind of out activating the turn. And it can really help disrupt those tempo plays. Whereas your opponent might previously have completely waited for you to activate your Unsullied, move somewhere, and then he will just charge you and then take the first activation in the next round, and you actually never get to attack with your Unsullied. They're just wiped off the board before you do anything. Now, when they charge you, you will instantly react by attacking back, and that's just going to make the Unsullied have so much more value.
I agree. One way to put it, I think, is it closes the gap. So instead of being activated by 3 or 4, which you can see when playing Targaryens, especially if you're dedicated to bringing those powerhouses, which I think is what they're about, right? This is the idea behind them. Now you can have Relentless, which gives you something to do with only 1 turn left for your opponent, rather than 4 in a row, right? So if you think of it that way, like, okay, I'm done, and now he has 4 turns, that can be absolutely brutal. But now it says, okay, I'm done, you get 3, and then I get to go one more time, or whenever I want out of those 3, 2 or 1, whatever, and then you finish up, so it's nice. I really like it. ranged, zone control. I'm my first list I want to try with Relentless is putting him in Bastards Girls. That's going to be
Hmm.
really fun, especially since earlier I snuck in a little snippet of I like Ramsey and Targaryens a lot. So Ramsey, Bastards Girls with Unsullied Officer is going to be fun. Um, Combining with some maybe Belwas now, having Dogged in a unit, or who knows. I guess you can't combine them both, but it also like increases, in my opinion, also increases the value of Jorah number 3 of 5, which is Pertinent Betrayer, because now Unsullied Officer is very valuable, and make sure you
Hmm.
have that bodyguard with you. Go ahead and run that unit up, come at me, bro, and then use Relentless a couple times, hopefully, before they die. But now you can pass Relentless on to the next unit, and it's just going to
Yeah.
completely become useful. So I really love this. I can't wait to get Targus back on the table. Any other like specific? And we should say if you haven't yet, check out the Targaryen deck. As soon as you use Relentless, you have infinite combinations available to you. Right? As soon as you make that
Yeah.
attack,
Yeah.
so like
You
it.
could be retreating from combat, taking like all the positional control that your opponent had away from them, as well as their attacking kind of momentum. There are tons of things that the Targaryens can do if they get an attack. Their problem before was that they just weren't being able to control where the fights happened,
Yeah.
and they had no response to your opponent just like dictating where the battle was, and now they do, and that's so important for me. Actually, the one I really want to try, and was a unit that I was already looking forward to using and was trying out, but was finding that in reality it wasn't having the effect that I thought it would, was the Stormcrow Archers with the Unsullied Captain. um, Saving a point brings them in at 8 points. 8 points for a unit that can activate fully by itself, has a 12-inch range, which it can then use to make another shot activation, plus motivated by coin, plus the bags. This unit can just completely rapid fire. But what it has now is it has an effect, which is if your opponent wants to come within range of you towards the late end of the round, you will get to do some reaction to it.
Yeah.
Things like the big ones are like things like really basic efficient units, which are normally the things that are activating you, such as Bolton Cutthroats. Bolton Cutthroats rely upon this effect of waiting till you're out activated, then marching close to you, then charging at the start of the next round, making you vulnerable, attacking with 8 dice. They're so explosive. They got the vicious. They could just blow up an archer unit like that.
Mm-hmm.
They can do it in one attack.
Mm-hmm.
It takes some luck and maybe some preparation, but they can do that kind of damage. If when you march, I get a shot off, a single shot can be enough to bring you down a rank and mean that I'm going to survive. And just that single step of being able to intercede in your plans is gonna give the Targaryens just so many more options, and I'm really pleased that they're getting a leg up here, because they need one at the moment, because they're losing the activation war.
I completely agree. Let's in our closing comments here, let's combine all of these wonderful creations of content we have going on right now. Let's head over to the Three Sales Gaming League and see who has an Unsullied Officer.
It might not be many.
Because this came
Of
out
course,
after lists were submitted, by the way, for anyone listening. They didn't
yeah,
know about
all
this
lists were
FAQ.
locked in.
But I did see a couple, I think, when I first looked through. So I'm going to find them real quick. And we'll give them a nod and hopefully hear some good stories soon. So let's check out Artonas real quick. He does not have one. Nope. All right, but he has that Wandering Knight. Hey, on both lists. On both lists. Very nice. Okay, some more use for him with that guy while he's wandering around. Then we got Bob Bernard. Bob Bernard, nope. And no Wandering Knight either. Okay. Bob Bernard, we're going to go down to Double Horse. Double Horse. We see an officer in Swordmasters. Heyo. Watch out.
Ooh,
So double
that
horse.
12-point investment
Yeah.
come good.
And he's using Barristan commander in that, so that's going to be nice. Oh, and a Belwas Pit Fighter. Look at that. Cool. All right. I can't wait to hear some stories from Double Horse. And then we
Oh,
got.
I've got one from Grisalug. He's running my preferred Stormcrow Archers with the Unsullied Officer.
Oh, nice. Okay. There you go. Nothing from Brush Brida. Oh, or you're ahead of me. I see.
Yeah, I came from the bottom. I came up from the bottom, and I think
Oh,
that's the end of
we've
our
met in
list.
the middle.
So
Okay, so we'll look forward to
we'll see if anybody manages to make those plays.
Gruselug and Double Horse. We'll keep an eye out.
But I think that what's important here is basically it's allowed the Targaryen player to have some level of control over whether or not they get to make this play. Because before it seemed like it was entirely in your opponent's hands, that they could force you to never be able to use your Unsullied Officer. Yes, maybe they had to retreat when they didn't want to or something like that, but basically they were always controlling whether or not you got to use your attachment. And now you get to use it to dictate your opponent's moves instead of them just saying, actually, I'm just going to deny your use of that really expensive attachment all game. And that's really good for all Targaryen players and good for the game in general.
Indeed. I'm going to look forward to like a high level play where you have the chance to use Unsullied Officer and you know you're going to kill the unit, but you wait until your last friendly turn so that another unit gets closer so that you can trigger your overrun. Bam! That's what we're talking about right there. Is you have control of when to use it and set up those combos, which Targaryens rely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome.
Exactly.
Awesome chat. Once again, as always, closing shout outs. Carlo, if you don't know, is from songoficeandfirestats.com. Please go make a profile, submit your games. Lots of tournaments happening. Check out his tournament chat on YouTube. Stats chat where Carlo rants. Not always.
Mostly.
Mostly. I have a random amount of content coming out. Who knows when or what. But I do have the Fantasy League going on with George from 3 Sales Gaming. And look forward to the big September 1st is very soon, a guild drop. So that's going to be awesome. Anything else I missed, Carlo?
Nope, yeah, just watch out for that guild drop and keep looking over on the guild page for the kind of articles that are coming out. And yeah, just be involved, get involved, and thanks for everybody who has already been involved.
Well said. All right, thanks for tuning in. Catch you guys next time.